Hello, everybody. My name is Brad Janes. I am the mathematics content manager at Wolfram Alpha, here today with some of my colleagues, Jordan Hassler, Jason Martinez, and Jason Sonnenberg. We're here to talk to you today about Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. I'll be giving an introduction to Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, including a tour of the features and capabilities and a brief look at the technology stack that enabled us to get here. Later on, you'll get more in-depth and overviews of some of the tools and content that we have available for some particular subjects. All right, well, first, what is Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition? Its name implies it's made of two parts, Wolfram Alpha and notebooks. So let's start with the first, Wolfram Alpha. Wolfram Alpha is a free website which has been around for over a decade now at this point. Let's open that here. And most of you, or at least your students, are probably already familiar with it. Um, while it initially looks like a search engine and you can interact with it in the same way, it's much more than that. Um, an early nickname it had was a computational knowledge engine. Wolfram Alpha seeks to computationally answer a user's input that they ask in free-form natural language. And we compute the answer not by searching the web or scraping various websites, but by consulting our own algorithms and knowledge base. What this means for education, one of our lofty goals is that anybody who has a question about the world or the universe, they can come to Wolfram Alpha to help answer it. From sciences to culture to everyday life, we cover topics that can be useful jumping off points for a whole variety of subjects. Um, Here's a list of our example pages. So let's look at something, perhaps words in linguistics. Here you can see we have queries based on anagrams or acronyms or notable text, public domain text, maybe even things about languages themselves, and you can get comparative information about the various languages here. Um, of course, what most students use Wolfram Alpha for is help with their math homework, typically through our step-by-step solutions. See an example of this here. Here you can see a question posed in natural language, just plain English, and we not only compute the result, but we also generate some visual information, additional related properties, and uh, we programmatically generate a step-by-step solution to show a procedure for how a student might compute this result for themselves. This is just a sampling, and Wolfram Alpha's math content is quite robust, and I could probably spend my full allotted time talking about what all goes into creating these results and how you can use them. But on top of that, as you've seen, Wolfram Alpha is so much more than just math, which both Jason and Jason will be highlighting later in this session. But first, yeah, let us look at the second part of Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, the notebooks. Um, Notebooks, just like their analog counterparts, are a blank canvas that can be used for writing, teaching, drawing, exploring, sharing ideas. Wolfram has been using the notebook interface for 35 plus years in its desktop and cloud products. Individual notebooks exist as files, just like PDFs or Word documents, um, etc. That can be shared back and forth between students and teachers for a variety of purposes. Traditional Wolfram notebooks, whether in the desktop or cloud environment, use the Wolfram language as the core method of interaction. This allows for everything from performing simple computations to writing elaborate executable programs. Um, However, most students and honestly most teachers are unfamiliar or unwilling to be made familiar with programming languages. Uh, Hence, we've come up with Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. So the main standout feature of a Wolfram Alpha notebook is the default way of interacting with it. Um, the Let me open a new notebook here. So while the default way of interacting with a traditional Wolfram notebook is through its programmatic language, the Wolfram language. The default way to interact with a Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition notebook is through natural language, just the same way you would send a query to the Wolfram Alpha website. One does not need to know how to write a function or what programming languages can do to start exploring. Um, so yeah, let's start exploring. You might have noticed that two of the presenters today have the same first name. So let's take a look at the names of the three of us here. Um, when I type in a query and hit enter or click on this compute equal sign, I get several things. First are several alternate interpretations or assumings, which are in place to kind of let the student know how Wolfram Alpha interpreted their query, and make sure that things are the way that they expected. Is Jason referring to a given name, or is it some spacecraft? Things like that. Um, Below that is a symbolic representation of the Wolfram language interpretation of the query. This is helpful for people who wish to either learn the language or just want to peek at what's going on behind the scenes here. But it could probably be ignored for most cases, or even turned off via this menu item. Um, and then finally, we have the result. Here we see that the name Jason is much higher ranked than the name Brad. So it's probably not that uncommon for there to be two Jasons versus only one Brad in the group. However, the name Jordan is even more common than that. So maybe you would expect there to be two Jordans. Anyways, it's a simple query, a simple result, but there's so many questions you can have, and possible avenues for further exploration. Let's try another query here. So this is a popular functionality from the Wolfram Alpha website, that is available here within the Wolfram Alpha Notebook environment. I can see there's several flights. This is live updated with my current position based on GeoIP. Um, and another feature of the Wolfram Alpha Notebook edition is that we can actually get the full Wolfram Alpha results in line in the notebook. So if we click on that, we get the same kind of information. Some of these planes might have moved in the few seconds that I've been talking about it. But you also get the other information that you get on the website with like this nice chart. So this should match. If I went outside and looked up, I could see uh, some of those planes from where I'm at. Another query to show off some other information. I ordered a package today. They said it'll be here in 5 business days. Here we can take a look and see when that is. Another feature of Wolfram notebooks is that they generate we call this a suggestions bar. And this is in place to show you that, or to suggest possible further explorations you might want to do. So, what if I wanted to see this on a calendar representation? So there I can see that. All right, so let's take a look at another example. Here we're doing some kind of pseudo programming, assigning a list of variables to a value that we can then further on in later queries ask about that symbol there. So I can ask for the median of grades. These are maybe grades in a classroom, and again, I can use the suggestion there to see what the middle value grade is. Another feature here that can be seen is the related computations, which are right here. So if I asked for the median of grades, this is suggesting to me other kinds of things that I can ask for. So looking at the query itself, I can look at the mean or the standard deviation, and this will generate a new query here and compute that. Another thing that you've probably already noticed is there's a step-by-step solution button to some of the inputs. If I click on that, I can get the same step-by-step solution that was visible on the website, and I can go through and see the procedure to how a person might work through that. A couple more features I want to highlight here. We have all kinds of data about all kinds of things in Wolfram Alpha, um, and a lot of those are accessible in Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. And one of those, some of these are 3D objects, which in the notebook environment you can directly interact with. You can rotate, you can kind of enlarge the thing to see more features and get different perspectives. And then my last live example here will be um, for certain kinds of entities that Wolfram knows about, we can generate these reports called data sets. And what these are is just a listing out of all of the properties, the various aspects and attributes of a particular object that we know about. And again, this can lead to analytical thinking about a particular subject. You can pull out the data from this thing. You can take a look at a particular, one of these items in particular, and then the final kind of feature that I'm wanting to show you with the notebook interface here is um, you can, just using natural language again, kind of refer to the previous output and do some sort of analysis or filter of it. Um, so this is another of our favorite examples to show off the dog vision filter. Um, and this session referenceability is a particularly useful feature for solving multi-part problems and deeper explorations. So I've shown off a bunch of cool things that Wolfram Alpha can do, Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition can do. Um, and I wanted to show off some of the more customizability things. Obviously, you can save these notebooks, you can publish them to cloud, you can adjust the permissions and things that you would need to do with that. There's various formatting options as well, so you can make sections, subsections, bullet pointed lists, things like that. You can change text color, background color, all of that. Um, Everything you need to kind of make the documents your own. So, uh, but yeah, I mean, we understand that a blank canvas can be a bit intimidating, which is why we've built in this header bar here. Um, this has several items on it that will help help people understand how they can use Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition and provide other teaching materials. So let me look at this. This first one is interactive demonstrations. The Wolfram Demonstrations project is a collection of interactive tools created by hundreds of users over several years. And these are all available locally for you to use alongside any other teaching material you might have um, or wish to create. So here's one in particular. We can take a look. This is showing how a train's wheels are driven and how certain aspects will change that, and it's something that you can interact with. And again, it's a 3D object that you can rotate around. The next icon at the top here is the starting point notebooks. These are exactly what their name implies, places to start for particular subjects. Let's take a look at one of them here. What these are curated Wolfram Alpha notebooks that show off our content, varying ways to ask for particular examples. And they'll act as blueprints for how you might put together a lesson plan or a handout of your own. Um, I love showing off the 3D things. This one's particularly fun. And again, you see the different kind of text sections with different formatting and section breaks and things. All right. The third icon is the interactive plot quizzes. These are a collection of a dozen or so tools that quiz a student on a particular subject. And their answer must come in the form of some sort of manipulation of a plot. Jordan will be showing off a deeper example of these. The fourth icon is for typesetting and special characters. So if you don't know how to enter a particular query, say the nth root of something, this is often a helpful way to get you started. You click on the template you want, and then you can tab between or click between or arrow keys to navigate between the placeholders. And you can even nest the different templates inside of each other. So like that, and evaluate it. And then these can also be interpreted alongside of natural language input within the same input cell there. The next icon is for settings, which is used to turn on or off various aspects of the interface. There's a couple other general settings in there. And then finally, we have the quick help icon, which pops open a web page, which shows off in more details a lot of the things that I've kind of rushed through today. The final thing that I want to show off today is the Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition in the cloud. And let me max this screen here. This is a shareable cloud environment. Makes it so students with access to tech like Chromebooks should have no difficulty accessing the same feature set that's available within the Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition on desktop. In addition to everything available in the desktop version, the cloud has a sidebar that includes even more examples of things to try, as well as some videos of potential how-tos and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of my intro. To summarize, you've been introduced to various aspects of just the basics of Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, including the features that truly set it apart. The natural language interface, the session references, the 3D interactivity, defining and using variables, further suggestions for exploration, and built-in examples. I believe Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition is a powerful tool to add to any classroom, and I'm excited to be able to share it with you all today. In this notebook here, which will be available to attendees at the end of the talk, is a list of all the examples that I went through, as well as some further resources at the bottom. Next up is Jordan Hassler, who will be talking about some of the mathematics features and functionality available with Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jordan Hassler. Today I'm going to be talking about using Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition in the mathematics classroom. So let me share my screen here. Okay, so when you're developing a mathematics classroom, you want to be able to pull in material from previous classes. And so today I was going to talk about how we can interactively build up a interactive classroom for studying integrals. So we're going to be plotting quadratic functions, and we're going to be determining area between quadratics. And so as a way to begin this, it's useful to be able to review previous courses. So as Brad was mentioning, we have natural language processing. And so we can type into here, quiz me on plotting quadratic curves, and this will bring up an interactive activity here. And I'll also show, as Brad was mentioning earlier, how to access through the various menus, the interactive plot quizzes as well. But what we have provided here is an interactive way to study and review pre-calculus material. So in this quadratic description plot quiz function that we've developed, there's a question here that we've determined that we want to plot a polynomial with an intercept at -4 and an x-intercept at -6 and -1. So notice we can adjust the points here. And so if we adjust this to -4, and if we adjust here to -6 and -1, then we can see that we have this quadratic polynomial. And now that we've plotted this, we want to be able to determine is this the correct answer or not. And so we have this check answer option here. And then we provide feedback on that, and such that you can, for instance, once you've determined the y-intercept and your x-intercepts, you can determine if your answer was correct or not. You can adjust the sliders further. And and so on here. And then this allows you to interactively check your answer, and you can generate new problems. And so notice that in the beginning, I didn't get that right because the sliders were not within a given threshold. So once you have this, you can, now that you've reviewed your material, now you can get into more of your calculus material. And so we can interactively build up a course. So notice here I've said, let's define two functions. And so I didn't have to provide anything in this input cell here. I could have had this completely blank and had this material right here entered here. And then the student would have to enter this in. And this could be blank, for instance. This is up to the educator here of whether you want the student to have to enter that part in as well. But the point being that you can design your course in different ways and at different levels. So in a calculus classroom, you're usually going to get directly to the integral when you're studying an area. And so you can directly compute out that integral using the function that we defined above. And you'll see that the answer is 8/3. And then, as Brad was mentioning, again, we have the suggestions bar here, so you could get the numerical value if you wanted that as well. You can do further calculations. So notice I've had this apply to limit here. This is one of our related computations, and you can access this right here. So we click on limit at x equals 0, and that will append this limit here. One of the unique features, as Brad was mentioning, of Notebook Edition is the ability to visualize and create interactive dynamics, which helps to think about what am I finding the area of? So we had those two functions. We had x squared and 2 minus x squared. And so when we were finding this, we needed to have some of this information here, right? We need to know where do these curves intersect. So it appears they're intersecting at -1 and 1 here. And we need to know what are we finding the area? Well, we were finding the area between those two quadratics. And once you have a plot, perhaps you want to verify that those are the exact intersection points. So we have added natural language processing for this as well. So you can type in solve f of x equals g of x, and this will return the input that we're trying to solve f of x equals to g of x. So as Brad mentioned, you can either keep the input cells here and use this to develop intuition and knowledge of the Wolfram language, or you can directly look at the result here. So as we noticed in the plot, the intersection points were at -1 and 1. If instead of wanting to compute out the area, we by using the integral, as I've done here, we could have also typed in area between f of x and g of x. And we would see that the area was 8/3 as well. So we see that the answers were green here, approximately 2.6, repeating. As Brad mentioned, there's also step-by-step, and that's in fact built into Notebook Edition so that we can type in show steps area between. We can show next step. We can show all the steps. And so you can see here that you're trying to set up an integral. You want to plot the appropriate regions, identify intersection points, and then once you have this information, compute out the integral from between those two curves and find that that's equal to 8/3. We've also built in common core standards and aligned content. So you can use these to guide your course. So for instance, what are the common core standards on polynomials? Well, we can return the 7 standards that we have for this. We can also return the Wolfram alpha cells here as well. And so you could see all of this in the Wolfram alpha function. So one of the standards is understanding that polynomials are closed under various operations. You can use the remainder theorem to determine if you know one of the zeros, you can determine more information on the other zeros. And we have listed all the various standards here to be able to determine your zeros and factoring the polynomials, etc. here. And we also can directly call that Common Core standard definition. And so now that we have this information on the Common Core standard, we want to be able to apply this in the classroom. So as Brad was mentioning, there's this item here, browse starting points. And so let's take a look at the polynomial starting points. So we have univariate polynomials, and let's just look at some of this univariate polynomial starting points that we have. So as we discussed earlier, we want to know about what is a polynomial, what is not a polynomial. So that's built into the system. You can use natural language processing to determine if something is a polynomial. So notice here we had real coefficients, and the powers were 0 or positive number powers on the terms with the x and the monomials there. And so this is going to be a polynomial. And then the next one, let's look at the power here. We have the square root of 2. So that's not a natural number there, so that's not going to be a polynomial. You can determine more information on a given polynomial. You could determine the degree of the polynomial. You can determine the exponent, etc. here. And so notice we were talking about Common Core standards earlier regarding that the polynomials were closed under addition and subtraction. And so we actually have these Common Core standards, and then you can apply some of those Common Core standards to create an activity on simplifying a polynomial, for instance. So we can add various polynomials and return another polynomial. That's what's discussed in the Common Core standard. We can also expand out a product of polynomials. We can, as discussed, use the remainder theorem and things like this. And again, we can call in the step-by-step and see how to simplify a rational function. And there are more activities within these starting points. And let me point out here that you can use these starting points when you're developing your own course. So for instance, you could copy and paste an example into another notebook, for instance. So we could copy this example here into the notebook I was developing earlier. I won't do that here, but I just wanted to point out you can copy and paste these examples and create your own course using some of the starting points, and then use those to build off and create more material there. There's more activities here on factorizing polynomials, expanding. And so you can, again, use this to build up a course. And notice here, we even have over various field extensions. So the activities can be used from the earliest starting points in educational programs. We have, for instance, step-by-step and manipulable items on addition and subtraction. We've been adding more and more on long arithmetic and long addition, etc. And we also include material that goes all the way to an abstract algebra class on factoring over extensions. And we can complete the square to determine answers. We can factor. And we bring in all the different methods that you would use to solve, for instance, quadratic equations and their solutions. And also we talk about the various forms of an equation, and you can determine the various forms and vertices, etc. And as Brad was mentioning earlier, we have demonstration projects that we can also create interactive activities. So we could vary the degree of a numerator here, and that will change this demonstration here. So you can create these interactive activities and look at how long division varies as you vary the degree of the numerator and denominator. And we have more examples to try here. One other thing I want to point out is also, as Brad was mentioned, we have the interactive plot quizzes. And so we've developed ones as well on calculus. So this includes differential equations as well. So we have the mean value theorem quiz, for instance, and you can use this in your calculus classroom. And again, interactively adjust the points here, and you can determine, for instance, tangent lines in parallel to the tangent line, a secant line, etc. here. Um, so, um, so to recap here, we have available the ability to interactively develop a course that goes beyond one item of information at a time, which is what really sets us apart from Wolfram Alpha, is that we can define our variables. We can then use information on the integrals, and we can carry out calculations and go much further than before, and we can add in interactive visualizations, and we can add in dynamic plots. And so at this moment, I would like to hand over to Jason Martinez, who will be talking about using Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition in the physics classroom.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Jason Martinez, and today I'll talk to you about what's new in physics. So, when we're talking about the Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition and physics, one thing we're often talking about is our formulas, and the step-by-step component of that. So when you ask for some simple physics problem in the Notebook Edition, you'll get some sort of interpretation in terms of a formula. And if we look at the full Wolfram Alpha results, we'll get the inputs and our results and our equations, and we'll also get this step-by-step solution button. If I click that, it'll fetch some steps for a moment, and we'll get a guide that takes us through the process of solving for for the solution, starting from converting our units into ones that are compatible with each other, and doing the algebraic rearrangement of the equations that we have our unknowns on the left-hand side, and substitution and unit conversions that come after that. One new feature that we've introduced this year is the ability to select what your destination units are. So previously, we would only show the results for this first case in the result pod. Yes, so let me just pick up right where we have the full Wolfram Alpha results. So like I said, this will show you the steps starting from your input values, any unit conversions that are needed, and algebraic manipulation of the equation so that you get back something that you can then insert your values into and simplify until you get to your desired result. And you can control the destination unit with this pull down that we've introduced this year. So if you want the results in minutes or hours, you can select that. That'll be reflected in this first step once it stops evaluating. And it will also, more importantly, be expressed in how it resolves the final unit conversions. One other thing that we are working on, and which has just come, which you can now see on our website and in Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, is support for multiple equations. Earlier implementations of our step-by-step functionality were limited to cases where we had a formula that had a single equation, so one unknown. But now you can access this functionality even if your calculation involves multiple unknowns. So if you're solving for the horizon distance, where we give back a solution both for the direct distance to the horizon and the distance along the horizon, along the surface of the planet that you're looking at towards the horizon for, in this case, the Earth. And so that will be reflected. We'll see both equations here. We'll substitute our values into both equations. We'll manipulate them if they're need to be manipulated, and we'll do our unit conversions on both. Now, one wrinkle to this is, of course, we need to be able to handle the case where our calculation relies on unknowns that are then being used in separate equations. So for example, with the mean free path, we solve for the mean free path, and we also solve for the average speed. But then when we look at the diffusion coefficient, we're going to need both those variables. And so our steps need to be able to handle that. Whoops. So if we go down to the step-by-step solution here, we take our equations, substitute in our values, but we still have unknowns on the right-hand side. So we take the cases where we have eliminated all of our unknowns, so like this first equation here, and we substitute that into the remaining equations, which is this step here. And then we can proceed along and deal with the very complicated expressions here, which you don't thankfully have to deal with because Wolfram Alpha will handle all of that and simplify them down into numerical expressions that you can then do nice, relatively neat unit conversions on. Another thing that we are working on is helping to add some physical understanding to the formulas as we introduce them. At the moment, we have only one of these extended definitions, and it's rather simple. But basically, it changes this introductory pod so that instead of just saying the equation for this variable is such and such, that we give a bit more of a natural language of how you would describe the equation. So for example, if we look at some stuff that's coming up in the next year, we've got power. So power is just work divided by time, but we have variations on the power formula that look at power as a function of force times velocity. So in this extended definition, we would then introduce the student to the power formula, but then we'd also point out that work is force times distance, and speed is position over time. And so you can see how that simplifies to this alternative formula. And we'll be having a range of these extended definitions coming out next year for mechanics, as well as electromagnetism and thermodynamics and statistical physics, at the very least. And I'll have a little bit more to say about the derivations and introductions of formulas in just a moment. But before I get to that, we have support coming for more empirical formulas. So these are formulas that have some sort of quantity factor, like 111.2 kilometers. And the complication there is we want to make the unit conversions and any cancellations as simple as possible for the student. And so what we do here is after we've introduced our formula, so like that 111.2 kilometers, we convert those over to units that are complementary to our input values. And that makes the final unit conversions and cancellations much simpler because they're all in compatible units. And that should be coming out at the very beginning of next year. Okay, and then lastly, in the upcoming features is more elaborate derivations of formulas. So we already support projectile motion formula, but what we would like to do is rather than just provide this equation to the student or the user, just to show them how this formula came about. And so after we deal with the input values and any unit conversions, that we start from the basic principles. So the kinematic equation in the y direction, we're trying to solve for the time it takes for the object to reach from its start point at the ground to arrive at the y equals 0 again. So we put in what we know. We're starting off at an initial height of 0. We know what the initial velocity is and the angle, so we put that in for the y component of velocity. We know that the acceleration acting on it is gravity. And we know that we're looking for the final y value of 0. And we have variations on this for all of the various options you could choose for this sort of calculation. So once we have that, we arrive at a calculation like equation like this. We can rearrange the terms. Obviously, one of them is trivial. It's our initial condition. And the other one we can then rearrange to arrive at the equation that we're looking for. And at that point, we can substitute in our values and so forth. And so we'll be able to solve for the travel time or the maximum height or the distance the projectile travels, all using this type of format. All right. Shifting gears, we also have some new functionality for step-by-step involving quantities, specifically the sum of quantities. So some of this is pretty trivial. Obviously, if we're adding two masses with the same units, then it's just going to be math. It's just 3 plus 2, that's 5. But if we're dealing with more complicated cases, like we're adding meters per second to miles per hour, then we need to do some unit conversions. And so we've added in step-by-step functionality to convert those units. You can choose what your destination unit is, which of the two in this case you're interested in, and that'll be reflected in the steps, which will then follow that pattern. If you have 3, you'll have a pull down with 3 different options. All right, lastly, just a few things for the Wolfram language itself, because we're always trying to help our users have a good starting point for using the Wolfram language. So when you, by default, if you ask for a particular formula, the equivalent in the Wolfram language will be formula data. And this covers all the various formulas that are algebraic in form. So it'll give you the equation. If we went and did a computation, it would fill in a second argument with all of the input values, which would then give you a result here. Since we're dealing in exact numbers, it's a little bit complicated, but if we change one of these to, say, 1.5, all of those radicals would simplify out. And so you can see a few different solutions are available. But there are a lot of formulas where that's not the best interpretation we could give. So, for instance, there are some calculations that are more involved, and we might want to use a function that's more involved to give a better result. So, for example, the Planck radiation law, we have an actual Planck radiation law function in the Wolfram language. So in those cases, we'll return that. We have a similar thing for, say, human growth data, which is not a algebraic formula by any means. It's all involving statistics and best fits and such. But we can get the same results you would get on the website using that function. In other cases, we make use of the Wolfram function repository, which is a repository where users, both internal and external, can submit their functions to be used by a wider audience. So here we have one that deals with Miller indices, gives us a plot of the Miller indices, so we have something useful for people to use, and just like any of the other graphics, we can turn it around and manipulate it. And then finally, there are some places where we don't have a good, it's not entirely obvious what the best default value is for our calculation. So for example, any place where we have a pull down menu, it might not be clear to somebody, what should D be? You know, I know it's degrees of freedom, but what does that mean? And so in those cases, we supply a default value. If I was to, unfortunately, I left this evaluated from earlier. If I was to evaluate it fresh, you would see that even the base default value before I hit compute includes this value that you can start from to give you a sense of where to go. And so that is what I have to share with you today. I'm going to turn it over lately to the other Jason, who will talk to you about chemistry.
Thanks, Jason. Hello, everyone. Let's share my screen and bring up the examples that I have for you. So my name is Jason Sonnenberg, and I'd like to share the tools that I wish I had when I was in the chemistry education classroom. So we have the starting point examples up here. And if we click over on chemistry, we can see that we've got quite a bit of content. There's 8 different notebooks. I'm going to focus on just the content that is in the elements and allow you to explore the rest on your own. But as you can see, you can ask for properties of elements. You can ask for, protons, electrons, how many neutrons. You can solve problems involving the mole, asking about Avogadro's constant, what its value is, things like that. And what I'd like to show you is a nice feature of the notebook, which here we're going to build the mass spectrum for boron. And you can go and through the series of queries that you can do, you can get the necessary information. So if the boron, ask for the stable isotopes. So now that you know that it's boron 10 and boron 11, then you can ask for the atomic mass and the abundance for the boron 11, and then store that into a variable. Do the same for boron 10, storing that into a different variable. And then you can just do a list plot of that with filling, and you see that you get a stick spectrum representation of the mass spectrum. Now, with the suggestions bar, it becomes very handy for students to take this default plot and turn it into something that would be acceptable for publication or submission to your class. And they can insert the labels by giving a plot label and axis labels. And then that puts the new input in here. And what you see is the final result, which we would accept for submission for the assignment. So that's just one of many examples in the chemistry starting points. There are many, many more covering the entire curriculum, and I encourage you to go check those out. We've also got quite a lot of support for molecules, since that's the heart of chemistry. And we do very well with structure visualization. So you can ask for simply the 2D plot of any molecule, and you'll get the molecule formed and the plot asked for, and get the rendering on the screen. Same with the 2D plot. Note that these are all completely rotatable live in the notebook, whether or not this notebook is on your desktop or if you're using the cloud version. This is a really handy way of getting 3D models electronically into the hands of your students, whether or not they're in your classroom or they may be working afar at home. We have support for IUPAC names. So here I went and grabbed an ugly smile string representation of an organic molecule from Wikipedia, and I just asked for the IUPAC name. And it goes and searches PubChem, creates a molecule, and spits back the formal name. We can do property visualizations just as easily by here, show the labeled hybridization diagram for ATP. So again, it goes and interprets into the ATP entity and asks for the molecule plot of the orbital hybridization. You can see the different hybridizations where S is just the default. There's no hybridization in the case of hydrogen. We also have strong support in version 13 for chemical formulas. So here I can put in a chemical formula, which this long chemical formula often causes new students in chemistry difficulties of figuring out how you figure out the actual number of each of the atoms. You can ask for the element count and get this back out. You see it turns into a chemical formula with the property. And then you can build activities around how to compute the 16 that, you know, got to multiply the 2 into the 3 hydrogens here and so forth. You can also ask for other properties. Here I've got a dithorium sandwich complex, and I've asked for the molar mass. Compute that right there. We can ask for the steps of that, where you can see all the steps. In the chemistry steps, we have in the second step always the plan step for how to tackle problems of this class. So anytime you want to figure out the molar mass, this is the plan for it. And this mirrors current pedagogy in the chemistry textbooks. And so then we build the answers, grab all the data that we need, and add it all together at the end. We have chemical conversion support. Chemical conversions are arguably one of the harder sticking points besides visualization for new chemistry students. And we have built in the ability to carry out the uncertainty throughout the calculation. So here I've said that I've got 5 grams of iridium, but I measured it on a milligram balance. So I've got an uncertainty of plus or minus 1 milligram. And I want to know, you know, this mass measurement, I want to convert it to amount, which would be the amount of substance, otherwise more commonly known as the moles. And we convert that into a chemical conversion, and we have a chemical instance, which allows us to specify a certain amount of a chemical object. And then we want to convert into the amount. And as you can see, the uncertainty is carried through the calculation. And so the uncertainty is then propagated into the number of moles, which allows us to then get away a bit from the laboring significant figure rules and start talking about experimental design and the uncertainty in our measurements in the laboratory. We can see the steps for this. Again, just show steps plus the original input. And here for the conversions, we don't have a plan, but we do have all the steps to go from, you know, identifying the initial mass, grabbing the molar mass, and then carrying that through in the fence form for unit cancellation. We have quite a large collection of calculators, as Jason was showing some from other domains, but here in chemistry, we've got about 56 of them, and the 55th and 56th are the 2 that I'm showing you here, the DNA mass to moles calculator and the DNA concentration to mass fraction. One thing to point out here is that when we're doing this conversion, we use an average value of mass per nucleide, and you could change that here if that's not the value that you would like to utilize. And then just hit compute and off you would go. We've been doing a lot of work with organic reactions and named chemical reactions. So Alpha now knows, and then therefore Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition also knows about the Friedel-Crafts alkylation. And here you just put in the name of the named chemical reaction and you get out the description. Now we could use the ability to get to the full Wolfram Alpha results to show quite a bit more details than just the definition. And we can load that up. And you can see that we've got basic properties, the type of reaction that it is, details of the reaction, notable folks connected to this named reaction, and popularity according to Wikipedia searches. I've shown you 2, the Friedel-Crafts alkylation and the Diels-Alder reaction. These are only 2 of the 209 that Wolfram Alpha now knows about, and we'll be adding to that as time goes forward. I should note that this information was started by one of our chemistry interns. So it's an example of students teaching students through our products. Another example of that is our ionic reaction support. So we've taught Wolfram Alpha to know about total ionic reactions, net ionic reactions, and spectator ions. So you can pass in the chemical formula with the appropriate states of matter and get the results. And we have steps for that. And now since all 3 of these, spectator ions, the net ionic reaction, and the total ionic reaction are related, when you ask for steps of one, you get the steps of the other available here in the drop down, and you can select what you want. I'm just going to show the total ionic reaction because they're all related. Again, as with most of the chemistry results, you get a planned step of how to solve this problem, and then we write the balanced molecular equation and break that up. Coming in the future will be support for exactly what's happening between step 3 and 4, a better understanding and description of how we break these ionic molecules up for the ones that are soluble. But right now, everything that I've showed you is available on the web and in the Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. If you're like me, when you were creating activities either for use online or in the classroom, you had to move things digitally. And with modern activities, there's quite a bit of information that needs to be present in the activity. And so here I have an example of an activity that I built exploring atomic electron representations. And you have plenty of space for the usual stuff, so prerequisite concepts, learning objectives for both you and your students, connections to the accrediting societies. Here I've made connections to the American Chemical Society, professional training standards. A statement for academic integrity, if your students will be working on this at home or in groups, they can read what they're allowed and not allowed to utilize when doing the activity and sign that digitally here. And then here's what an activity in chemistry in Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition notebook would look like. So we have some instructions and then a blank space for the student to do things. So here, we need a periodic table. So the student could type in, I need a periodic table. Correct your spelling mistake, then you'll get a periodic table back. And so they don't need to have the periodic table up on the wall or have brought a hard copy with them. They can pull it up digitally. And then the structure of the activity is the particular steps that they need to do, spaces for doing more calculations, and then answering their results here. And when they were all finished, they could then submit this to the cloud for you or others to interact with and potentially grade. So just to reiterate, we had quite a bit of interactive demonstrations for chemistry. And here I've utilized one of those and plopped it down right inside of the notebook so that it can be utilized in the activity. The student can explore this presentation of the electron arrangements in the elements and compare that to the other ones that they had interacted with, and then put their answer together. One last thing to show before we answer questions. We have quite a bit of chemistry resources for educators, and that's here at this page. And just to highlight a few of the things that you can find when you click on this link here, we have an overview of all the chemistry functionality in the language, just to emphasize that, yes, chemistry is a core part of the Wolfram language. And we have our link to our newest dilution calculator, specialized page for teaching and solving dilution problems, which are a struggling point for chemists and non-chemists alike. And then lastly, a fast introduction for chemistry students who might be graduating from Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition into just standard Wolfram notebooks and using the language directly. This has quite a bit of tutorials for them. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I'll offer to answer any questions that anybody has. If there are no questions in chemistry, I'm sure the rest of the speakers would be happy to answer any other questions if they still exist.
Yeah, we've answered several of the questions that have come in through the Q&A. There's a question that just came in about quantum physics. Jason M., do you have any?
We have some quantum physics formulas. I don't think we have any built-in functionality, along the lines of making Feynman diagrams or something of that sort. There is work being done to add some more slightly more math-related things like PD support for Schrodinger equation type calculations.
We also, excuse me, we also do have a quantum framework, which is a Packlet, which is out, that might be worth mentioning to answer part of that question as well.
Yeah, and I will also post a link in the chat panel here in a moment. We just finished a 1-week quantum framework daily study group. So I can share a link that you can go back and watch any of those recordings.
If someone has Notebook Edition but not Mathematica, can the Wolfram code returned after an input be evaluated? Yes. Can any arbitrary... I will say a soft yes. Like what's happening? What's happening in Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition is that your natural language query is getting sent to the Wolfram Alpha servers to help parse it, to interpret it, and then find the best Wolfram language representation of your question. And then that gets sent back to the notebook, which is then the thing that's evaluated. So yeah, Notebook Edition, Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition does handle arbitrary Mathematica code. I mean, if you're wanting to do the normal Mathematica thing and write a full package or something, doing that in natural language is not, like, we're not quite there yet. So yeah, I guess the answer to that question is a soft yes. The question about bundling the Pro subscription with the Notebook Edition, which maybe Noah or John could answer better.
Do you have another question that came in about using palettes with Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition?
So right, the palettes that are built into the menu, Jason, you could show that. There's the writing assistant palette, which is mostly just for creating different cell types, text color and size and styles, like your typical Word document. And then the other one is the special characters palette, which, if you wanted to use Greek characters or other diacritics and things like that. Yeah.
So that's where they are. Pardon me. So there's a special
There it is.
character and the writing assistant.
I think we could probably wrap it up here. It looks like questions are slowing down. We'll probably stick around and answer the few remaining ones there. But I want to say thank you to Jordan and Jason, as well as John and Noah and Cassidy for support on the back end there. Yeah, thanks to all the attendees as well for being patient with us. And I hope you all get to try out Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. And please let us know what you think. And I hope to see you again in a future session. Thanks, everyone.